Hey, this is Alex with AFS 401k Retirement Services. It's episode number 68 of Money Hacks. We are less than 2 months away from the 2020 presidential election. And so we've had a lot of questions and concerns from employees and investors about their retirement savings and what impact the election might have on their 401k and 403b accounts, and what they should do when it comes to their investment strategy. So I found a recent article from Steve Vernon, who's a contributor with Forbes and part of Stanford's Center on Longevity. He's an author. He's written on retirement savings and retirement income in several books. And I'll cite or reference the article in the notes here. But it had a couple of tips that we think make a lot of sense. And one of those is that if you look back historically over a long-term period of time and you look at every 4 years when we have an election, it doesn't really matter which party wins the nomination and what impact that has when it comes to long-term retirement savings. Now, I think that given the really unique and extraordinary year we've had here in 2020 and the resiliency of the financial markets through the last 6 months, we would expect that there is the opportunity or the chance for heightened volatility as we go towards the 2020 election and into the end of the year. Regardless of your political views or beliefs or who may win that election. But we also think that for long-term savers, what happens in November won't have a huge impact over the next 10, 15, or 20 plus years when it comes to your 401k, 403b, or IRA savings accounts. So it makes sense to build a strategy for the long term that can weather the ups and downs of the market and the economy. Now, for those who are getting closer to retirement, if you're within 5 or 10 years into retirement and you want to make sure you can protect what you've accumulated, Steve Vernon points out a tip of having a sleep at night strategy. And we follow this with our own clients in talking about buckets for retirement. And that our baseline recommendation is that you have about 3 years worth of your living expenses in some type of low risk cash equivalent asset or interest bearing asset, so that if you go into a volatile market or a bear market or a downturn, you have this money set aside to cover you for the next 3 years or the first 3 years of your retirement. And you don't have to make changes or take distributions out of your retirement assets that are invested in the market while the market's down. So for longer term investors, certainly there's no need to take big action or make big changes in your account just because we're in an election year. For those who are getting closer to retirement, if you're concerned about the volatility or the polarizing nature of this upcoming election, perhaps following that sleep well at night strategy and starting to become more conservative and putting some assets and safer investments to help fund those first few years of your retirement. Overall, given that we've seen a really resilient market and a strong recovery from the lows in March 2020, this is a good time to review your account. And if you're worried, we would never suggest trying to time the market on when to get in or when to get out. But if you are concerned and you feel like you might be taking too much risk, it's a good time to assess that and perhaps reduce your stock exposure by some amount, say 5, 10, or 15%, again, depending on your own personal strategy, in order to take advantage of the all-time highs we're seeing in the market, but also reflect both your time horizon and your risk tolerance. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, or feedback. So check us out on social. Thanks again. See you soon.